Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Etadhyaturachitanam matra sparshe chayamuhu bhavasindu plavo dristo haricharayanu varnanam. It is personally experienced by me that those who are always full of cares and anxieties due to desiring contact of the senses with their objects can cross the ocean of nescience on a most suitable boat, the constant chanting of the transcendental activities of the Personality of Godhead. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The symptom of a living being is that he cannot remain silent even for some time. He must be doing something, thinking of something, or talking about something. Generally, the materialistic men think and discuss about subjects which satisfy their senses. But as these things are exercised under the influence of the external illusory energy, such sensual activities do not actually give them any satisfaction. On the contrary, they become full with cares and anxieties. This is called Maya, or what is not. That which cannot give them satisfaction is accepted as an object for satisfaction. So Narada Muni, by his personal experience, says that satisfaction for such frustrated beings engaged in sense gratification is to chant always the activities of the Lord. The point is that the subject matter only should be changed. No one can check the thinking activities of a living being, nor the feeling, willing, or working processes. But if one wants actual happiness, one must change the subject matter only. Instead of talking about the politics of a dying man, one might discuss the politics administered by the Lord Himself. Instead of relishing activities of the cinema artists, one can turn his attention to the activities of the Lord with His eternal associates like the gopis and Lakshmis. The Almighty Personality of Godhead, by His causeless mercy, descends on the earth and manifests activities almost on the line of the worldly men. But at the same time, extraordinarily, because He is Almighty, He does so for the benefit of all conditioned souls, so that they can turn their attention to transcendence. By doing so, the conditioned soul will gradually be promoted to the transcendental position and easily cross the ocean of nescience, the source of all miseries. This is stated from personal experience by such an authority as Sri Narada Muni, and we can have the same experience also if we begin to follow in the footsteps of the great sage, the dearmost devotee of the Lord. It is the prayers of the Vaishnavas that keep us always connected to Krishna. The more we understand this principle and take shelter of the kindness of the Vaishnavas, the more we will realize the great gift of Krishna consciousness that Srila Prabhupada and our beloved Acharyas has given to us. Today I am reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 6 of the first canto, which is a story that perhaps we have heard many times, and Srila Prabhupada cited again and again, because it is so graphic in revealing this truth that we are discussing. Narada Muni is speaking to Vyasadeva in this verse. His personal experience, his realization. There's jnana and vijnana. Theoretical knowledge, and that which, through grace, comes upon us so that we have direct experience and realization of that knowledge. The purpose of all knowledge is realization. And what is Narada Muni's realization? That for those who are full of cares and anxieties due to desiring the contact of the senses with their objects, they can cross the ocean of nescience on the most suitable boat, which is the constant chanting of the transcendental names and activities of the Personality of Godhead. In this sector of the Bhagavatam, we find Vyasadeva, son of Parasara Muni, in his hermitage in Badrikashram, seated on the banks of the holy river Saraswati. He's feeling in his heart the pangs of dissatisfaction. But nothing like the dissatisfaction that any conditioned soul feels. Because he was in perfect health, he was perfectly self-realized on the transcendental platform himself, immersed in the absolute truth. He was liberated from all the dualities of material existence. For such a person, what could be the anxiety? He was beyond birth, old age, disease, and death. He was transcendental. He was thinking in his mind. He's an incarnation of the Lord who has descended to show compassion to fallen souls. And because Vyasadeva is Trikalagya, he could see past, present, and future perfectly. He doesn't have to go to some Bhrigu Samhita expert or an astrologer or a palmist who usually get things wrong anyway, or at least mixed up. He was seeing directly through his heart, past, present, and future. And he could see the coming of Kali Yuga and what would happen to humanity. People would be mad after sense gratification. Because of that madness, they become dishonest, crooked, sinful, full of hypocrisy, and even in the name of religion. They engage in materialistic activities. He saw such an avalanche of degradation. People were short-lived, and they had very limited intelligence. How would they understand his knowledge? So he took the one Veda, Yajur Veda, and divided it into 4 parts to make it more easily assimilated, understood to common people. And then he wrote the 5th Veda, which includes the Puranas, Itihastas, Mahabharata, Samhitas, Sutras. All of those together are declared to be the 5th Veda. And he did it all just to uplift humanity. That was his mission. Why? Why was he still feeling dissatisfied after performing his duty? He was searching out the cause. And he contemplated, perhaps because I have not specifically glorified the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It was at that time that Sri Narada Muni appeared in his ashram. Narada Muni knows exactly where to be. He is expert at Kaladesha Patra, the right place, the right time, to the right person. And he knows exactly what to say. Just like he went to Kamsa, when Kamsa was in somewhat of a forgiving mood. He said, Kamsa, any of these children could be Krishna. The person that's meant to kill you. So he knew exactly what to do to perform the highest service to the Lord. Although sometimes Narada Muni seems to be preaching something very different, it's always what ultimately is the best service to the Lord. And he was fearless. Daksha had so many sons. Go perform tapasya so that you are suitable to get married and produce progeny, because I am Prajapati and my duty is to procreate and you are my sons. It is your duty in life to assist me by having many, many, many children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and continuing on. But he was a very religious man, Daksha. So he understood they had to become purified before they could be proper grihastas. So they went to the forest, and Narada Muni knew just exactly when to arrive. And he gave them nice harikatha and concluded, this is all Maya. We should become brahmacharis. Why do you want to get entangled in all these things? That's for people who need that. But you are advanced souls. Follow my path. They never went home. They became brahmacharis. Daksha was furious. So what's the solution? Have more sons. And he told his next sons, do not do what your brothers have done. Do your tapasya and come home and do your service. Your prescribed duty. So they went to the forest. And Narada Muni knew exactly where to be at the right time. And he knew exactly what to speak. He said, your brothers are so happy, why don't you follow in their footsteps? He gave them philosophy also, but I can see in the heat, better to just tell you the narrations aspect. So they left. Daksha was so angry. Now, for most of us, someone as powerful as Daksha, you know the story of Daksha with Lord Shiva, whose temple we are sitting today. When he entered into the assembly, all the demigods, sages, rishis, prajapatis, they all stood up to honor him. He was so effulgent, so beautiful, so powerful, so learned, so pious. Spontaneously, they all stood up to honor him. But Lord Shiva was performing a higher service. He was meditating on Krishna. When you're completely immersed in Krishna, like an avaduta, then you are not responsible for the apparent rules and regulations of this world. Daksha was furious. So he cursed Shiva. Haribo. And Shiva was so compassionate, so patient, he didn't say a word, he just walked out. After hearing so much blasphemy of himself. And what did he do? He just remembered Krishna, that's all. But Daksha was furious. So we understand how powerful Daksha is. After Narada Muni made every single one of his sons sadhus in the forest, convinced every single one of his sons to disobey his father, what did Narada Muni do? He went to visit Daksha. Now, how many of your brahmacharis would do that? Daksha's a dangerous person when he's angry. Narada Muni just went in, very happy. Haribo. Daksha was so furious. He cursed Narada Muni. First he blasphemed him. Then he condemned him. Then he cursed him. According to the Karmakanda Shastras, he was quoting from the authority of Scripture how Narada Muni had deviated and ruined his sons' lives by causing them to prematurely renounce the pleasures of this world, which are so essential for someone to enjoy on the progressive path back to Godhead. And Narada Muni didn't argue. Because how can you argue with somebody who's raging mad? And ultimately, Daksha cursed Narada Muni. That because what you have done to my sons, you have taken them away from home, you will never have a home. You will never be able to stay in one place. You will always be wandering like a nomad. Now, Narada Muni understood that whatever he was doing in the service of the Lord, he accepted whatever reaction to be the mercy of the Lord. And he was grateful. He did not retaliate. Rather, with his folded hands, yes, I will wander. And there Srila Prabhupada explains that some of the parents of his devotees cursed him in the same way. That's why he's always traveling. But he said, I want to sit down and write my books, so I want some of my disciples to take that curse on my behalf and travel and preach the glories of the Lord. And what greater benediction is there? What greater benediction is there than sharing Prabhupada's curse, his service, which he graciously accepted? So Narada Muni appears at Vyasadev's ashram. And immediately, Vyasadeva stands up, although he's an avatar, all learned, sees past, present, and future. Still, he humbled himself to a senior Vaishnava, to his guru. He offered him a sitting place, offered him nice services with great humility and respect, and asked Narada Muni, why is this anguish in my heart? Narada Muni already knew there was anguish in his heart. That's why he came. He said the reason for this is you have cheated the people. Yes, you have given them the Vedas, the Puranas, the Mahabharata, the Itihastas, the Samhitas, the Sutras. But you have not specifically glorified the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. No doubt in your Puranas you describe the activities of the Lord. But they are in a setting where the prominent lesson is Artha Kama Dhamma Moksha. Pious religious activities, the path of improved sense gratification, the path of improving our wealth, and liberation from suffering. Yes, you have discussed the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but in literatures that are filled with these sub-religious principles. Therefore, you are not satisfied in your heart, and nobody who reads your literatures or follows them will ever be satisfied in their heart. Because it is the constitutional nature of every soul that we are part and parcel of Krishna. To love Krishna, to hear about Krishna, to chant Krishna's names. Now you must write that literature which specifically and exclusively glorifies the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the path of pure devotional service. Srila Prabhupada explains, the Vedas teach us these various systems to gradually elevate us from the materialistic platform. Religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, liberation. But beyond liberation is devotional service to the Supreme Lord. It is beyond the modes of material nature. The modes of passion and ignorance simply create agitation and anxiety in the heart. The balanced mode is goodness. It creates peace, equanimity, a very higher purpose of life. But it cannot satisfy the heart because it is still on the material plane. But when one transcends the modes beyond mukti to devotional service, then only can we be satisfied. So in this way, Narada Muni, he instructed Vyasadeva, and Vyasadeva instructed the world. That the same thing that causes a disease, when used in a different way, could be the cure. Material activities, material thoughts, material words are the cause of all bondage. Now, Srila Prabhupada explains if you have indigestion from too much milk, the cure is dahi, or curd. It's nothing but milk, just in a different form. So now we are being put into various difficulties because of our material activities. But activities, thoughts, and words, there must. Just keep them in the service of the Lord. And Srila Prabhupada is explaining here in this beautiful purport. People like to go to cinemas. But we could discuss the beautiful pastimes of Krishna and gopis or the Lakshmis. And we get those same experiences, but we become purified. People are attracted to politics. Too much, everywhere. The newspapers, the news, so much politics. But they're politics of dying people. Mahabharata and other great literatures teach Krishna's politics. When Krishna enters into politics, and it's the most fascinating politics, but yet it purifies the heart because it's the glorification of the Lord. So Vyasadeva, you write that literature that exclusively, without compromise, praises the path of pure unalloyed bhakti and glorifies the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. And that literature is the Srimad Bhagavatam, the cream of all Vedic literatures, the Paramhamsa Samhita, that literature which is especially relished by the highest, most purified lovers of the Lord, the Mahapurana. Vyasadeva asked Narada Muni, what was his past? This is a common question people ask. How did you become Krishna conscious? Or some people may ask it in a different way. How did you end up like this? You used to be so normal. You used to be just like us. You were doing all those transcendental activities like watching the television and going to the cinemas and going to restaurants and enjoying so many varieties of food. And you were socializing and going to parties and taking so many different types of intoxications. How did you end up like this? With beads around your neck and mud on your head, wearing these clothing that were a style 1,000 years ago. So people are interested. And devotees are interested especially. So Vyasadeva was interested. But Vyasadeva was interested because he understood hearing about the Lord's mercy on a great soul is the highest subject matter. And we find that is the primary subject of Srimad Bhagavatam. How the Lord shows mercy to his devotees, even in the most difficult circumstances. And Narada Muni's own life was a very, very difficult circumstance. He explains in a previous kalpa, he was a very simple, uneducated son of a widowed maidservant who was very, very simple by nature. And he was very much loved by his mother because he was the only child. He was all she had in life. During the 4 months of the rainy season, a gathering of great sages, devotees, assembled in the forest. And Narada Muni's mother engaged her son in personally serving them. This is very, very essential lesson. He was only 5 years old. He wasn't highly educated. He wasn't from a high family. He was just a simple boy. But he was well behaved. He didn't speak nonsense things. Somehow or other, the association of these devotees impelled with him a desire to serve. He served them with all of his energy, with all of his intelligence, with everything he had. He was at their disposal to do anything and everything for them, with no ulterior motive except to please them. Srimad Bhagavatam declares, Shushusho Shridadanasya Vasudeva Katha Ruchi Syanmahat Vipra Punyatirtana Sevana. How do we develop a taste for hearing the message of Krishna? It comes by serving the great souls. Sometimes people are interested. They have a taste due to interest to hear about Krishna. But Ruchi, Vasudeva Ruchi, this is something very deep. It is something very special. It's when from our heart, not just our mind and our brain, there are many people who like to hear about Krishna or Lord Ram, but it's on the mental platform. But in order to actually have that taste from the heart, it's something that comes when we sincerely serve great personalities. Just as His Holiness Niranjan Swami Maharaj was speaking this morning, the greatest of all commodities in the creation is faith. Because through faith we can overcome all obstacles. Through faith we could understand our relationship with God and realize it. Our spiritual advancement is simply the development of faith. Ado Shraddha, that's the seed. And everything else, Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya, and all the stages are just deeper, deeper, higher, higher developments of faith until we come to praying, which is the highest pinnacle of perfection of faith, where unalloyed love awakens in our heart. How do we get that faith? By hearing from, associating, and rendering service to those who have faith. Srila Prabhupada gives example, when you put iron in fire, it becomes hot and red like fire. We become what we associate with. If we associate with faithless, our faith dwindles. If we associate with the faithful, it grows. And what is the greatest association? To serve, with no ulterior motive. What an example. A 5-year-old little boy of a maidservant. But somehow or other, by causeless mercy, he had a desire to serve with his heart and soul these Bhaktivedantas and please them. And by doing so, he developed higher and higher states of consciousness. Narada Muni explained he was so humble. Once only, with their permission, he took some remnants of their food. Because of his devotional service attitude to the Vaishnavas, he was so receptive that just taking that prasad one time had such a massive effect on him that he developed a taste to hear their message. He became addicted to listening to every word they spoke. And all they spoke about was Krishna. The pastimes of Krishna, the philosophy of Krishna, the great devotees of Krishna, and their relationship with Krishna. He was absorbed, constantly hearing, constantly serving in the association of saints. He became so attached to them. They were his life and soul. Lord Kapila Dev explains, what is the perfection of life? To become attached to pure devotees. The same attachment we have to material things, if we just repose that attachment to pure devotees of the Lord, that will be the path of perfection. Because when we become attached to pure devotees, we associate with them, and all we hear is Krishna Katha, Krishna Nam, and Krishna Seva. Harivo. Narada Muni told Vyasadeva, after the rainy season and the autumn season, these Bhakti Vedantas, they left. But not before profusely blessing him for his very humble, enthusiastic service attitude. From this story we learn a fundamental, essential principle for making spiritual advancement is the spirit of servitude. Being the servant of the servant of the servant, with no politics, with no hypocrisy, with no ulterior motive. When we have a proper service attitude, we can actually taste Krishna in his prasad. And when we have a proper service attitude, we become deeply attached to the Vaishnavas. And when we have that spirit of humble service, Hari Katha becomes alive and awakens devotion within our heart. That is why Srila Prabhupada and our acharyas so much stress the humble, sincere spirit of service to please the Lord, to please the devotees. Recently it was Christmas. Christians all over the world were celebrating the appearance of Lord Jesus. Lord Jesus spoke to his disciples. He said, how will you, if you cannot see, if you cannot learn to properly serve the people who you can see, then how will you properly serve God who you cannot see? What is he saying? Lord Chaitanya put it so succinctly. Gopi Bhartur Padakamalayora Dasa Dasa Dasanudas. You cannot approach Krishna without serving the devotees. And Srila Prabhupada explains the more we have love of God, the more our service attitude expands and our love expands. Begins by serving Vaishnavas. For some it begins by serving Guru. If you understand Guru's teachings, you dedicate your life to serving Vaishnavas. If you have a higher understanding, you realize you're meant to serve all humanity. And when you come to a higher understanding, you're meant to serve every living entity who is part and parcel of Krishna. That is love. Love is high to the degree it expands and includes more and more. And if you water the root of a tree, automatically every limb of the tree is nourished. When we actually love Krishna, then our love will be expressed toward every living being, unconditionally, spontaneously, both our friends and our enemies, both the great and the insignificant. So the basis is developing the service attitude. Then the taste for prasad in its spiritual context. The taste for the holy name, the taste for Harikatha, the taste for deity worship becomes deeply rooted in our heart. Narada Muni was feeling intense separation when the sages left. In his heart of hearts, he had one desire in life: to follow in their footsteps. Just to roam around glorifying God with no other responsibilities. Doesn't that sound attractive? Many of you are shaking your heads no. Either knowingly or unknowingly. But what was little 5-year-old child to do? He was the life, the soul, the everything of his mother. And because she completely depended on him as the only child, she showered so much affection on him. Affection that's practically impossible to escape. But one night, when she went out to milk a cow, she was struck by a serpent. And she gave up her life. Think of the traumatic experience that this would be for an ordinary boy. 5 years old, living in a forest. No income, no one to support you, no home except your mother. She was the everything for him. And she just died. But because of his association with the Bhakti Vedantas, he saw this as the mercy of the Lord. He saw this unthinkable crisis to a small boy as a benediction. Because he understood by hearing Harikatha and serving the devotees that the entire creation is ultimately under the control of the Supreme Lord. The Lord is like a puppeteer. And the Lord always does what is ultimately best for His devotees. That was the degree of this small child's faith. This is a practical example of how faith can help us to cross over every obstacle. Like a lotus flower, like a lotus leaf, even in the muddiest situation, remains clean. If we have that faith, even in the difficultest, most dirty situations, we could have joy and hope. After 4 months of serving in the Association of Devotees and hearing their talks, when his own mother died at the helpless, dependent age of 5 with nothing and no one, there was no other relatives in his life, he understood this cannot happen without the Lord's mercy. The Lord will never do anything if it doesn't help His devotee. So he went searching for Krishna. He says that he went through metropolis cities. And he went to where he saw all the consumerism and fast pace of life. Then he went into the towns where people are gathered together to try to live comfortable lives, having their employment and so forth. Then he went into villages and into the farmlands, agricultural fields he traveled through. Then he entered into the forest. And he crossed over caves and lived in caves and crossed over mountains and hills. Saw beautiful rivers and lakes. All the while, he had one thing on his mind. He was searching for Krishna. Now, if you were a 5-year-old child, your mother died, you had nothing else, you'd probably stay in the city, because at least there somebody could take care of you. But he went into the darkest, deepest regions of the forest, which were totally uninhabited. Places where the only citizens were snakes, owls who like very, very dark places, and other wild animals. That is where he chose to reside. There was no food or water. He felt very hungry and very thirsty. And then he came to a river that was like a lake. And he touched the waters and drank it. And immediately, just by the touch of that water, he felt refreshed and energized. Nearby was an ancient banyan tree. The little child sat under that banyan tree to meditate. Srila Prabhupada explains, it wasn't just an impersonal meditation, nor was it a concocted meditation. He meditated exactly according to parampara. Because amongst his gurus, the Bhaktivedanta, he heard the descriptions of the Lord, His form, His pastimes. So Narada Muni meditated within the core of his heart on the description of the Lord's form just as he had heard it. from the sages. And because of his humility, his service attitude, and his willing to take all risks for spiritual perfection, the Lord immediately reciprocated. As he was meditating, the Supreme Personality of Godhead appeared within his heart, and he could see him face to face. Upon seeing the Lord, tears flowed from the child's eyes. His limbs trembled. He was in ecstasy. He had attained the supremost treasure. There was nothing else that he could possibly desire after seeing the Lord's form. But in a moment, that form disappeared. He stood up, looking here and there. He was so agitated, so disturbed. Where is he? Where is he? He tried the same exact techniques, but the Lord did not appear. Over and over and over again, he tried. It was as if he attained the greatest of all treasures, and then in a moment, he lost everything. He had nothing. In his desperation, the Lord spoke to him within the heart. Srila Rupa Goswami tells us, what is the price of Krishna? Lobha. That greed to have Krishna. That greed to hear about Krishna more and more. That greed to love Krishna, to know Krishna, to serve Krishna. The more we're greedy for Krishna, the fever of greed for selfish material pursuits reduces. Srila Prabhupada explains here that you cannot stop thinking. You cannot stop talking. You cannot stop acting. Now our minds, our bodies, and our speech is very greedy. Greedy to taste, greedy to see, greedy to hear, greedy to touch, greedy to speak, greedy to smell, greedy to feel in our hearts, to think with our brains. The more we learn to be greedy, to be anxious, to be feeling separation from the Lord, the less we have any taste for materialistic pursuits. So this little child, he was desperate. There was nothing else that he could possibly want except to see Krishna again. And Krishna understood his desire and spoke to him. He said, in this life, you will never see me again because you are not completely pure. But because you will cultivate this longing to see me, to longing to know me, longing to serve me, that longing in itself will completely purify you of all sins, of all material contaminations. And in your next life, you will always remember me. You will see me as my intimate associate. So he spent the rest of his life just roaming from place to place, chanting the names of the Lord, chanting the pastimes of the Lord, Even when he was alone, he would chant the Lord's pastimes. It's a fact. You don't even need a listener. If you have listeners, that's also very good. And you can share, exchange. Intimate relationships develop by sharing Krishna. But as Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur says, if no one comes to listen to you, then you preach to the four walls. And that is just what the child did. He would just describe the beautiful pastimes of the Lord so that the Lord in his heart would hear. And he would chant the names of the Lord constantly as he had heard. And he meditated on the beautiful form of the Lord. And he explains, just like darkness and then a flash of lightning. When it was the time in his life when he died, immediately his consciousness was illuminated. At that time, Lord Brahma went to take rest. 4,320,000,000 years equals one of Lord Brahma's days, and 4,320,000,000 years equal one of Brahma's nights. So when it's time for Brahma to go to sleep, he has a really good rest. If any of you really like to sleep, then there's no better birth than Lord Brahma. He goes to sleep. He enters into Lord Vishnu, Garbhodakshayi Vishnu, who's laying in the ocean of devastation. And he sleeps soundly. And at the end of that night, by the Lord's arrangement, Brahma wakes up. And then from Brahma, by the mercy of Lord Vishnu, so many other living entities take birth from him. And at the very beginning of the creation, at the beginning of that day of Brahma, that child took his next birth from the body of Brahma as Narada Muni. And Narada explained to Vyasadeva, he had a completely transcendental body, a spiritual body, which was not subjected to birth, old age, disease, or death. And he could go anywhere and everywhere. He could go to the transcendental world of Vaikuntha. He can go to any place in the material world at any time, within moments. And Krishna personally gave Narada Muni a veena to play. How can we imagine the sweetness of a veena that was personal gift of the Lord? He plays his veena and day and night chants the names and glories of the Lord. And we know some of the pastimes of Narada Muni's traveling and preaching. What a powerful person. He was the guru of Vyasadeva. He preached to Prahlad when he was in the womb of his mother. And what was the effect? He preached to Dhruva Maharaj when he was in total distress and humiliation. And what was the effect? He preached to Valmiki Muni when he was a highway robber and murderer. And what was the effect? He preached to Kamsa. And what was the effect? Krishna appeared. Narada Muni is everyone's well-wisher. He has no business in this world. Now, if you had the power to just within moments, just fly to Vaikuntha. Narada Muni could do that. Why wouldn't you stay there? Why come to this world of birth and death, hypocrisy and deceit? Because it was the Lord's wish that Narada Muni preach. Showing compassion to others within this world is the greatest service that please the Lord. In Babulnath Temple of Lord Shankar, we honor and respect Lord Shiva as Vaishnavanam Yata Shambhu. Although he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead who has, according to Brahma Samhita, just changed his nature like milk to yogurt, still he's fully divine person, but by his own sweet will accepts some material qualities for his role in this world. And why is he called the greatest of Vaishnavas? Because he was willing to take the greatest risks and tolerate the greatest inconveniences for the welfare of others. That is greatness. In other words, to the degree we're selfish, we are very small in the eyes of God. And to the degree we are selflessly willing to live for others, we are great in the eyes of God. And the greatest para-upakar, the greatest thing we can give to others, is the way to love Krishna. During the churning of the ocean of milk between the suras and the asuras, they were looking for nectar. They were expecting nectar. They were really working hard, struggling, straining to lift that mountain and breaking their arms and their legs and carrying that mountain to the ocean of milk with the help of the Lord. And then churning, and Vashuki started shooting fire at all of them. They were getting burnt, but they continued on. Then the mountain started sinking, and they were struggling, and Kurmadev appeared in the bottom to hold it up. Can you imagine how greedy they were for nectar? That they were willing to work so hard. They were willing even to make a truce with their worst lifelong enemies. That's how desperate they were for that nectar. We have to be even more desperate for the nectar of the holy name if we want to taste it. The nectar they were looking for, the asuras wanted that nectar and the demigods wanted that nectar so that they could increase their sensual enjoyment. The asuras wanted the nectar so that they could conquer others, defeat others, exploit others with more power, undefeatable. That's what they wanted from the nectar. And the demigods wanted the nectar so they could enjoy pious activities and do a little service. Devotees learn that the real nectar, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the oceanic nectar of pure devotion, we also have to be willing to endeavor with great efforts and greed to achieve it. Because yegatamam prapadyante. As you approach Krishna, Krishna will reciprocate. If we only want the nectar of Krishna consciousness and we're only willing to invest a little of ourselves, we'll get a little. But if we give all in all, we receive everything. So they were giving all in all. But they had the wrong motives. But they really were expecting nectar. And they worked so hard for days and days and weeks and months, just moving and churning and moving and churning, and one difficulty after another. And what did they get? The first thing that emerged from the ocean, they were expecting this nectar to come out, and instead, poison. That is Krishna. He doesn't give the nectar easy. He wants to test us. That poison was not like any poison created by man. This was a poison that there was such a quantity, and it was growing in all directions. It had the power of destroying all life within the universe. It was on the verge of doing that, extinguishing all life, not only on Earth, but the whole universe. That was the power of this poison. And there was no, Dwarkadish, what do you call it? Antidote? There was no known antidote. It was death. So what do? Both the demons and the demigods, they had to just helplessly cry out to the Lord to save them. The demigods approached Vishnu. Now Vishnu loves to see his devotee glorified. And who is a greater devotee? The Lord himself, in the role of a devotee, is Lord Shiva. So Vishnu said, go to Shiva. Only he can help you. So they went to him and prayed, please help us. Now today, nuclear waste, they put it underground in some containers. But they know in due course of time it's going to eat through the containers and enter into the earth. Or they put it in oceans and containers, but they know that nuclear waste is so powerful, it's just a matter of time till it has to eat through anything. And then what a disaster it will be. In America, there's one devotee, very nice devotee, Vijay Madhava. And he works, I believe, in Georgia as an engineer trying to manage nuclear waste that was put there decades ago. It's really a serious service. If they make one mistake, massive deaths, poisoning. Haribo. So what to do? Now here is the most deadly poison, hundreds of millions of times more deadly than nuclear waste. There was nowhere to put it. So when they approached Lord Shiva, it was his meditation. There is no greater service than offering compassion to other living beings. In fact, Srila Prabhupada explains there's no greater service that pleases the Lord than taking risks and accepting inconvenience in order to show compassion to others who are suffering. So Lord Shankar consulted with his wife Parvati, and then he, by his mystic powers, he concentrated that oceanic quantity of poison so it could fit in his palm. Now today people are very mad after concentrates. Yes, like, if you get juice, it's usually made from concentrate. Well, the origin of concentrate is Lord Shiva. Can you imagine the power of all that poison with all of its vital venom in the palm of his hand? Hare Krishna. Then he drank it. so that everybody else would be free of its influence, he drank it himself. His neck turned dark blue. And that is one of the greatest glorifications of Lord Shiva. Kalakanta, Nilakanta. That means Lord Shiva in his mood of taking all risks and inconveniences to show compassion to others. Therefore we honor and worship Lord Shiva in this mood. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught us how to do that. When Lord Chaitanya was in Bhuvaneshwar, he was dancing before the deity of Lord Shiva, Shiva Lingam. Lord Shiva was so happy, because usually he's always dancing for Vishnu, but now Vishnu is coming to dance for him. Loving reciprocation. And in Bhuvaneshwar, they first offer the prasad, they bhoga to Vishnu, and then they offer that prasad to Lord Shiva, Bhuvaneshwar. Because they understand that is the prasad, that is the food that Lord Shiva most relishes. Shankar Bhagavan ki jai. Babunath Ji Mahadev ki jai. Hari Bol. So this was Narada Muni's spirit. He left Vaikuntha and travels throughout this world, age after age after age, only for the purpose of giving Krishna to others. Playing on his veena, inducing people to take the holy names as a supreme friend and well-wisher. By Srila Prabhupada's grace, we have all entered into Narada Muni's family. We are in Narada Muni's parampara. And Srila Prabhupada often said, we are in Narada Muni's parampara. The first Acharya, Krishna spoke to Brahma, Brahma spoke to Narada, Narada spoke to Vyasadeva. Many years later, Vyasadeva instructed Madhvacharya, and then coming through the disciplic succession of the great saints of the Madhva Sampradaya, Madhavendra Puri appeared, Ishvara Puri, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Lord Chaitanya wanted to be in the parampara of Narada Muni. In fact, Narada Muni appeared with him as Srivas Thakur to help him to spread the holy names throughout the world. Hare Krishna. So Narada Muni explained this beautiful story to Vyasadeva. And toward the conclusion, we come to the verse that we're reading today. The Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, whose glories and activities are pleasing to hear, at once appeared on the seat of my heart, as if called for, as soon as I begin to chant his holy activities. It is personally experienced by me that those who are always full of cares and anxieties due to desiring contact of the senses with their objects can cross the ocean of nescience on a most suitable boat, the constant chanting of the transcendental activities of the Personality of Godhead. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he is the very personification of Srimad Bhagavatam. Narada Muni has instructed Vyasadeva that the Srimad Bhagavatam will be the crest jewel of all literatures, and you will find ultimate satisfaction by giving this to the world. Why? At the very beginning, the Srimad Bhagavatam declares, Dharma projita kaitavatra, kicks out anything but the pure glorification of the Lord. No other purpose or subject matter that does not culminate in unalloyed, selfless devotion, love of God. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came through his teachings, through his activities, he personified Srimad Bhagavatam, which culminates in the love of Sri Radharani for Krishna. From the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, we gain the basics of pure devotional service, and we move upward until we come to the 10th canto. Its culmination is the 5 chapters of the Ras Leela, the gopis' love for Krishna. And the essence of that is Sri Radha's love for Krishna. Lord Chaitanya is Krishna, who wants to taste the sweetness of Radha's love. So Krishna accepts the loving sentiments of Srimati Radharani. But when Krishna explained this to Srimati Radharani, she said, how can I allow you to do this? Because I know my love for you. You don't understand my love for you. When you experience my love for you, you will fall on the ground, unconscious. You will fall on the ground completely aloof to anything else. And I cannot tolerate thinking of you rolling on the ground. Your body is so soft. If a single pebble touches your feet, it turns red. Even the softest part of our bodies, when we touch it to you, we feel that we may be hurting you because your body is so soft. Therefore, my Lord, if you appear with my sentiments, then I will cover your body with my golden complexion, so that when you fall to the ground and roll in the ground, you will not feel any pain. I will protect you and endure it myself. So Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is Krishna with the sentiments and the complexion of Srimati Radharani, to distribute her love to the world. That is the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam. Radha's love for Krishna. And Srimad Bhagavatam we find throughout the glories of the holy name. The final verse of Bhagavatam tells us that simply by chanting the holy names, Nam Sankirtan, we'll be free of all sins and attain Krishna's love. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he is expressing the supreme love of the spiritual world, and he's offering it to everyone and anyone without making any discrimination of who is fit or unfit. And along with Lord Nityananda and the Panchatattva, giving this greatest treasure through the chanting of the holy names. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, So this is the spirit of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, to give Krishna to others. This is the spirit of the parampara of Narada Muni, and how Srila Prabhupada fulfilled that wonderful mission. And today I would like to offer my gratitude and congratulations for all of the devotees who have distributed Srila Prabhupada's books during this December marathon. As Prabhupada taught us that by giving these books, we're giving him personally. By giving Prabhupada personally, we're giving the whole parampara, we're giving Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, and Radha and Krishna, putting right in their hands. By touching the book, they become purified. By reading the book, they become cleansed. We cannot calculate the value. We're giving Srila Prabhupada's love and his mercy to these people. And they're paying for it. We don't care about money, but when they give something for it, there's a reciprocation. That reciprocation is something very holy that they benefit tremendously from. And while we were in London, I was hearing almost every day news about the book distribution marathon. How many devotees went to Dadar? 80? 80 devotees in one railway station. And how many books? 1,800 in one Bhagavad Gita's. And for the month, I think 52,000 Mahabig books. Let me try to calculate. 30 days, 52,000. That's according to Krishnananda Prabhu, who is a master's graduate from Rice State University. That means all of you distributed 1,800 of Srila Prabhupada's Mahabig books every day. It's amazing. Thank you. On behalf of Srila Prabhupada, I thank you. And we pray to Srila Prabhupada, he showers his blessings more and more on you. And I'm sure wherever Narada Muni is, he's playing his veena and chanting all of your names for doing this nice service. When he goes to Vaikuntha, he will say, just see how these devotees have served Prabhupada so nicely. It is our good fortune. I thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. At this time, with your permission, we will practice the culmination of all knowledge, absorption in Nam Sankirtan. Now, you know the most famous pose of Lord Shiva is Nataraj. Everyone, please sit. Lord Shiva is the most graceful, enthusiastic of all dancers. Nataraj. And in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Leela, he came along with Mahavishnu as Advaitacharya, and how he danced ecstatically. So today, in honor of Sri Babulnath Mahadev, let us follow in the footsteps of Lord Shiva and dance ecstatically. And chant very loudly.